Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors.
Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast. It's Ali introducing the podcast for once. Again, I just keep moving forward and going higher.
You've had a couple where you were sitting in the co-pilot seat. Now this is like your first time driving. So.
I've put some graffiti on the seat just to make sure it's mine. Tell Michael he's not coming back.
Yeah, really get comfortable.
So today, what do we have, Dallas?
So today, this is one of those topics I feel like now that you've had a couple to ease into that are sort of fairly black and white. And my concept today that I want to talk about, this could be one that, like I do to Michael sometimes, where I start talking about something and I just get blank looks from him and you've got nothing to add. So the concept I want to talk about here is that moving into cash in retirement, so moving your superannuation, your pension accounts, any of those sorts of things, moving fully into cash, in many cases, doesn't actually impact your retirement, but it can actually just cost your kids. So there's a couple of theories that I've got here about this, but first I know you want to annihilate me about this because
no, it's I've been really looking forward to feeling the pain that Michael goes through sometimes and seeing surely it can't be that bad, but you know, sometimes you do just keep going, and then we've talked about 5 different topics, so I think this might be a good one.
So what I'm talking about here is that there's a thing we've talked about a lot on this podcast, which is that people get close to retirement or they get into their retirement, and their impulse is that they should move all of their money into cash or into term deposits or that sort of thing. And you know, you've seen this before.
Yeah, many times.
It's like, and it's not. It's often just a thing that's almost social conditioning. We've heard that. Okay, well, I'm a pensioner now. I gotta be safe. I gotta be secure. I've got to have all my money.
That's right. It sort of ties into the podcast we did earlier about loss aversion and stuff. So
yeah, that's right. So people are already worried about losing money, and then it's like hey, my income's going to stop from work. I really don't want my balance to be dropping at all, and so people's impulse is to move into cash and not always, and sometimes it's the other way, but often people's investment strategy leading up to into early years of retirement is too defensive. And what I mean by that is they get too much of their money allocated to cash, not enough of it invested in growth assets that's going to be working for them over the long term. And so again, like you, the point that you touched on in that in the podcast about losing money, it's completely understandable. You know, I mean, no one wants to have to be going through volatility while they're retired and while they're drawing money out of their retirement savings. That's right. But the reality is that for most people, they can just look at that and go, I need to draw. You know, the amount of money that I need to draw out of my retirement savings, if I move it all into cash, I will just run out, and I know that is the case. Yeah. And that's more so one we see for people who are, you know, say retiring at 60, and they might have, you know, $2 million in retirement savings, and they want to draw $100,000 a year out of there, and the $100,000 a year, you know, after you allow for inflation, that goes up each year, and so you've got, you know, next year's $103,000 a year after, a bit more and a bit more. When you look at that with people and go, well, if you're retiring at 60 and you want to draw that 100,000 and allow for the fact that things are going to get more expensive, their first impulse is to go, well, it'll last for 20 years, which is 2 million divided by 100, but it won't.
Exactly.
As I said, things get more expensive, so it normally lasts for somewhere around, 13 to 15 years.
And again, touching on the point of losing hurts more.
Yeah.
They don't because they can't really feel that loss, because that's 20 years down the track. They can't think or imagine what that feeling would be like.
Yes.
Because in their mind, they're fine at the moment.
Yeah,
and they can do that.
And that's exactly right. It is and that's sort of exactly why we go through that process of saying, like, you're fine this year, but what about and you know, you're the man who often when we're looking at this, you're the one who's really looking at the nitty gritty of this with our clients as to where does that put you in 15 years, and that's exactly like I touched on before. It's to say, well, you might not like the feeling of of having to have your money being volatile and having to grow that over the long term. But the alternative is, rather than making it a pure numbers and cents thing, if you look at it and go, well, you might feel a bit uncomfortable now, but if you don't do this, if you just leave your money in cash, you are going to run out in 15 years' time, and then you'll be really uncomfortable then. So
Yeah. I think when you put it to them black and white and go,
yeah,
okay, you can do that, but
that's
you will run out of money.
Yeah.
I think it sort of opens it up again and go, oh, no, I don't want that.
What are the trade-offs?
Yeah, what are the trade-offs there? Okay, what, and you find that balance sort of in that. But
That's exactly right. Yeah. So that one's pretty easy, because when you got people who are retiring at 60 and you go, right, you want to live the one I'm sort of looking at or thinking about at the moment, and I've I had this just recently with clients, like really nice, lovely people, and they're a bit older and have retired a bit older and have less in retirement savings. They're getting a bit of money from Centrelink. They've got it. Basically, the calculation we're looking at with them is that they're sort of going, well, why not just have all of our money in cash? So you know, they're in their mid 70s, and I was jokingly always ask people how long you're going to live for, but these guys are sort of going, well, we think we'll live for another 10 years, and whether that's true or not, we'll find out in 10 years' time.
Yep.
But they're kind of looking at it and going, yeah, we want $60,000 a year, and we've got $700,000 or $800,000.
Yeah.
Even allowing for inflation, we can just have all that sitting in cash, and we can just
they can do
pull
that.
that out, and that will they won't run out of money until they're of an age where they're telling me they're probably going to be backed over. So
Yep. That's a nice way to put it.
yeah. That's the bushy coming out here. Yeah, they'll back over there. The really technical.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I always say to people is, like, if that's your strategy, there's a couple of things to be aware of. Number one, you better die by the time you're in your mid-80s, because otherwise you are going to run out of money. So
you've left yourself no room.
Yeah, you've left yourself no margin for safety. So the best case / worst case scenario is that you do pass away by the time that happens. And often, we've talked about that at length. Often people underestimate what their life expectancy actually is. People who are coming to see us and are thinking about the future are often making reasonably intelligent decisions about not doing anything too crazy, taking care of their health, and they're probably going to live longer than average. And people often underestimate how long they are actually likely to live for, particularly when it's a couple, and you get one member of a couple is likely to live longer than life expectancy on average. So that's sort of point one, is that you're really not leaving yourself much margin for safety. If you think that you're going to pass away by a certain point and you don't, there's nothing. There's just nothing left. The second point there is that for a lot of people, and these guys in particular, if you're at that threshold of you are going to you're almost at part pension stage, or you might even be getting a small part pension, and by that I mean part age pension from Centrelink. When people have a lower balance, they're often more worried about volatility.
Yeah.
But in reality, and we look at this. You've got a few clients that you've looked at this with, where if you're on that borderline, you can actually afford to have more volatility in a strange way, and it doesn't feel right. It's very counterintuitive. But as your balance drops, if your balance drops over the next 6 months, your Centrelink pension will actually pick up under the assets
and supplements that loss.
Yeah. So basically, if you're getting slightly more from Centrelink, you just need to draw less out of your retirement savings while your balance is down. So,
that's right.
So that's kind of part two, is that once you allow for Centrelink kicking in there, you're often going, there is a bit of a downside protection there, which is that when those temporary declines happen, you will. You'll actually get a bit more from age pension.
You get a bit of relief there, because you're at that line where you can sort of afford. It's weird. It does sound counterintuitive, because you're like, balance is a bit low, so you're in a position where you can't really afford to lose too much or draw too much out of your retirement savings. But the big thing is
invested in,
that Centrelink sort of kicks in, and it does supplement that loss. So at that sort of stage, it's like you can sort of afford to do that.
Yeah, and this is one of those things. It's not like And the language you use there is exactly right, Ali. It's not that you can afford to take more risk, because the point is that it's not more risk.
Yeah.
You can afford to take on more volatility because it's the risk is not the same, because you're not forced into actually selling.
Exactly. Yeah.
When share prices drop, you are not as much of a forced seller of shares as someone who is a fully self-funded retiree.
That's right.
And the third point here, which is, I guess, tying into 1 and 2 there, is that for most people, the reality is if they're on track to probably just scrape through, if they were to stay fully invested in cash, and they do go fully into cash, the things that happen there are that if they do live longer than what they expected, you know who's going to get a caller? It's going to be the kids. And so that was my point of this podcast, is that moving into cash can often cost your kids more than you, or instead of you.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, if you're 87 and you run out of money, you know, you are going to have to move in with someone. You know, what I mean? It's, you know, and that disregarding, you know, you can move into aged care and all that sort of thing and all the rest of it. But when I say it's going to cost your kids, that's one way, which is what people often think about, which is that, oh, I'm going to have to move in with the kids and that's going to be burdensome for them and all the rest of it. But the other part to that is that there's the opportunity cost, or the growth that you could have had on those assets, or the buffer that you would have had left over, which is what we're essentially talking about here, which is that if you run completely out, we're not talking about taking crazy risks and trying to you know, triple your money over that last 10 to 15 years of your life. It's really just about making sure that you do keep a buffer. That buffer does two things. It means that you don't run out, and it means that you don't have to move in with kids or change your living situation in a way that you really don't want to. And the second one is, that's the difference between when you pass away, if your kids are left with, you know, some bills, or if they're left with a bit of a lump sum.
Yeah. What would you do in that situation, Dallas? I'm pretty sure you had a podcast.
I give it all to charity, and the kids get none. But that's a.
I guess that's a good thought, because you want more to give to charity.
That's the point. Is that and you know, as you're alluding to there, Ali, I've done a whole podcast about like not leaving anything to my kids, and I still at this stage it's still my strategy. But I think that it's any way you look at it, I would rather not have to rely on anyone else while I'm still living.
Yep.
I would be a cantankerous old man. We know that. I already am when I'm 33, so I can't imagine what I'm going to be like at 93.
Yeah.
If I get that far. So I don't want to have to rely on anyone else. Because of that, I need to allow a buffer. I need to allow a margin of safety. And what that means is that when I pass away, there's going to be some money left over. And that will either then, you know, assuming Nicola lives longer than me, that will be allow for her to have that same buffer and same margin of safety and same choices in her later years.
Yep.
Or it just allows me to either then go, right, do I want to give that money to charity? You know, for other people, they might want to leave stuff for the kids. There's just more choices there. And I guess the point that we're making there is that it's often that the trade-off isn't what you think it is.
Exactly,
you know what I mean? It's not a case where you go, well, we're taking more risk and you might be able to leave more to your kids. It's like if you structure this the right way, the risk is minimal. Because we've got we've allowed for all these different things. We've allowed enough cash to make sure we can get through the lean years. We've got the fact that Centrelink will kick in. There's all those sorts of things. We've allowed for, you know, if you live longer than you expect, and there's that bit left over.
That's right.
To go to the kids. So
it's the term risk. It sort of annoys me with investing, because again,
everything's risk.
Everything's risk, and the only risk that I guess gets considered a lot of the time. And it's no one else's fault, but it's just the way it's been communicated to most people is that volatility. They think that's the only risk, but again, you risk running out of money. You risk not leaving enough for your kids. You risk having to put the burden on your kids for having them to look after you. There's so many other risks that are involved that people just also need to consider as well.
It is funny, because that is, again, in the interest, like there's a few counterintuitive things about this, but like when you talk to people about this, you go, well, you can do that, but the risk is that you'll live longer than you thought you were going to. It's like, it's pretty weird to say that's a risk. You go, it is a good problem to have, but it is a problem that needs to be solved. So you're right. It's like that word risk, when you're looking at any retirement planning, but particularly when you're looking at that investment strategy piece, it's like you got to allow for all those different those different risks, and that's exactly. It's not just a matter of does my balance go up or go down. It's like what are all the possible eventualities here?
Exactly, and finding that perfect balance and
Yeah.
making sure you can cover those bases as well.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. For more information and resources, visit the Money Over 50 website, mo50.com.au. We look forward to catching up again soon.